The way your company grows fast is you set your people free. You allow them to be the best version of themselves, and you say, look, I want all you can give me. I hired you to be smart and brilliant and make a difference. So go do that. If you set up a place where people become dependent on you because you have this advice-giving habit, everything slows down, everything fails to scale, but everybody's comfortable because you feel pretty good about it. Because even though you're offering up slightly crappy advice to solve the wrong problem, you're like, look, I'm the smart person here, I'm the boss, I'm adding value clearly, I'm in control, I get my ego stroked, I know what's happening. And they go, this is awesome. We've just got this dude doing our work for us. And I don't have to take responsibility. I don't have to come up with the ideas. I've trained my boss to be the person who fixes the stuff and takes home the anxiety and the worry and the responsibility of trying to get this stuff sorted.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow? Getting your employees to do the work. Having a performance-driven organization is probably important to you as a leader. But let me ask you this question. How important is developing the people around you? How important is developing their skill sets, developing their critical thinking, developing their confidence and courage? I claim that as a leader, that you should be putting as much effort into the development of the people as you do into the performance of the organization. Now, I say that because I've been talking to founders, CEOs, just like you, that want to grow their companies fast. And those companies that are growing fast really do focus on growing their people. Today, we have a special guest. He is the author of The Coaching Habit and the new book, The Advice Trap, holding it up here if you're watching on video. His name is Michael Bungay Stanier, and he is just a great way to look at how you should be leading with a coaching-like style. Be more coach-like, be curious. Some of the things we talked about today is the principles of coaching, like be lazy and also be often. We'll explain what those mean inside the interview, but this interview with Michael is really something you don't want to miss if you want to be a more effective leader, if you want to develop the people around you so that they have the confidence and courage to carry the business beyond where you have taken it to this far. Here's the interview with Michael. Before we dive into the interview, I wanted to remind you that you can actually get a tool that I've been working with clients with for the last couple of years. I've refined this tool that's gone through several iterations. Now we have it completely automated. You can actually go online and fill out the leadership quiz. To get the leadership quiz, just go to theleadershipquiz.com. That's pretty easy, right? Theleadershipquiz.com. What you will get when you do that is you will answer a few questions. You will see where you rate based on the core principles of fast growth companies. If you're ready to grow your company or you want to see where you are, then make sure you go to theleadershipquiz.com. Inside it, you will get insight to where you are, understand where you want to improve, and you will get them mapped into the 10 areas that are most specific to fast growth companies. Again, go to theleadershipquiz.com and you can get that right now. Michael, how are you?
Dean, I'm really great. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm flattered to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you. When the email came in, I was really, I've already recommended your book, The Coaching Habit, a number of times to clients and others that want to increase their capacity to coach. So thank you for that first.
Yeah, my pleasure. The Coaching Habit book, which is the one you've been kindly recommending and talking about, it has been this phenom that has thrilled me to bits. Not least because, and this is the side story, I tried 3 years to get it published, got it turned down by publishers, and in the end self-published it. So the fact that it's been quite as successful as it is even sweeter as a result.
Well, I can appreciate that. And now we're here to talk about the companion book, The Advice Trap. Great name, again. I always ask every author, why did this book have to be written? Because we know writing is not easy.
No, it's terrible. I mean, anybody who's listening, who's going, yeah, I should write a book someday, call up Gene and call up Michael and go, what's it like writing a book? It's miserable. I mean, you have this good idea and then you write a first draft and the first draft is terrible, always. You're like, oh, I can't translate it. And then You write a second draft and it's even worse. And by the time you're on the upswing, you hate yourself and you hate the idea and you hate the book. So yeah, you want to be really clear about why you would want to write a book. And here's why. So The Coaching Habit, success, 750,000 copies sold, far exceeded all my expectations. And part of what's brilliant about it for me as the author is I get kind of on a daily basis pretty much emails from people going, I love your book. It's changing the way I lead. It's changing the way I relate to my kids and my spouse and my peers and my boss and my team. It's wonderful. And I'm like, that's awesome. Consider my ego well stroked. There's also people who don't write me, but who I think look at the book and they go, it's a good read. I quite enjoyed it. You know, you're funny at times, kind of. But I haven't shifted the way that I lead. I still tend to leap in and lead with advice and tell people what to do. And I do it for good reasons. I'm trying to be helpful and I'm trying to speed things along and I'm trying to make sure that, you know, wheels don't fall off. But this idea of shifting my behavior so that I can stay curious a little bit longer, it's you know, those 7 questions you give me in The Coaching Habit, they're not enough. And I'm like, you know, that's true. For some of us, we get this idea of the power of being coach-like, of being curious. And we're like, great, I've got good questions now. I'll incorporate that into the way I show up. Other people are like, I don't get it. And I'm like, okay, so why is it so hard to shift our behavior when there's so much good research that says, look, the way of it's not the future, it's the way of leading now is enhanced and more effective if it blends coach-like, being more coach-like as part of it. And the heart of this book is, all right, let's roll up our sleeves and get down to what's the behavior change required to be more coach-like. And the metaphor that is central to the book is you got to learn how to tame your advice monster, because we all have these advice monsters. And honestly, knowing that founders and CEOs are listening to this show, you're all worse than most because you've got to where you are by being an entrepreneur, by being courageous enough to make decisions, by leading. And you spent a lifetime being rewarded both in terms of money and status and ego stroking by being the guy or the gal with the answer. And your advice monster is loud and strong and present. And you may have the best of intentions to show up in a generous, curious way of leading, but your advice monster keeps sabotaging those conversations. And that's who I've written this new book for.
I love that idea because, you know, even as a coach myself, working with leaders, I still have to stop myself from giving the answer and really, you know, I forget about how I'm supposed to stay curious. So when I look through this book, it's like, how do you stay curious longer? So let's talk just a little bit for a second on why should we be curious as leaders?
Yeah. Well, the first thing just to put on the table and make really explicit for people is I'm in no way saying never give advice, because clearly that would be ridiculous. I mean, advice is just part of civilization, part of human interaction. I am saying that the problem is not advice. The problem is when giving advice is your default response. It's your habit. And when that's the case, there are 3 ways that advice giving goes badly wrong. So let me run through the 3 of them. The first is this. Most of the time you're trying to solve the wrong problem because you get seduced into thinking that the first challenge that gets put on the table that shows up is the real challenge. And it almost never is. It's somebody's best guess, an early hypothesis, a rough articulation, but almost never is the first challenge the real challenge. But even if somehow miraculously you and the other person have got this perfectly crafted problem statement and it's definitely the real challenge and the hard thing that needs to be looked at. The second issue around why advice giving kind of can go bad is that actually your advice is not nearly as good as you think it is. And if you're listening to this podcast with Gene and me and you're like going, but Michael, you haven't met me and you need to understand my advice is miraculously awesome all the time. Well, then there is 1,000 TED videos on cognitive biases out there that you should take a look at, which will show you just how badly wrong we get advice most of the time, particularly if you're a person who believes that you give good advice. So there's the opening salvos, which is, okay, you're solving the wrong problem, and you're offering up slightly crappy advice to solve the wrong problem. So that's already an issue, right? Because that's wasting time and money and resources and people's lives. But there's a third reason why advice giving goes wrong, and it's this. And this cuts both ways. The first is if you're on the receiving end of somebody's advice monster, if somebody keeps giving you advice all the time, you're getting the clear message that you can't figure this out yourself. Your job is just to take orders. It's not to actually deploy your own brain and get stuff done because you're not smart enough, fast enough, experienced enough, moral enough, clever enough. You're just not enough to get it done. So that's diminishing for that person. But if you're on the other side of the conversation and you have an advice monster, and I'd put good money that everybody listening here has an advice monster. Well, put aside the fact that you're disempowering everybody around you. Put aside the fact that you're becoming a bottleneck in your own organization that you are leading. The added responsibility of going, I have to have all the answers. I have to save the day. I have to rescue the people is exhausting, and it's frustrating, and it's inefficient, and it's absolutely not scalable. Apart from that, you're awesome.
I love that. I liked the part you talked about disempowering. One of the big things behind my research, Michael, and I know you're not that familiar with it, but talking to hundreds of founders and CEOs from the Inc. 5000, they want to have an organization where people feel like owners.
Right.
And this sense of ownership means they feel empowered. It means there's a sense of transparency and trust that goes on, but they're included. And right. When you give advice, you're not including someone else's thoughts and opinions and giving them any credit for that. And so what you're saying is kind of saying it differently. They keep coming back for the answers from you and not expecting them to come up with the answers.
And the thing is, this can feel kind of comfortable on both sides. Because you are a coach and a thought leader to people who lead fast growing companies. And as everybody listening does, which is like the way your company grows fast is you set your people free. You allow them to be the best version of themselves, and you say, look, I want all you can give me. I hired you to be smart and brilliant and make a difference. So go do that. If you set up a place where people become dependent on you because you have this advice giving habit, everything slows down, everything fails to scale, but everybody's comfortable because you feel pretty good about it. Because even though you're offering up slightly crappy advice to solve the wrong problem, you're like, look, I'm the smart person here. I'm the boss. I'm adding value clearly. I'm in control. I get my ego stroked. I know what's happening. And they go, this is awesome. We've just got this dude doing our work for us. And I don't have to take responsibility. I don't have to come up with the ideas. I've trained my boss to be the person who fixes the stuff and takes home the anxiety and the worry and the responsibility of trying to get this stuff sorted. So it can become a kind of corrosively colluding relationship where we're like, okay, we both feel stressed, but we're both kind of comfortable in our stress around it.
Hold on. Michael just talked about setting people free. As a leader, your job is not to control them, but to set them free. What I mean by that is you want to empower them to share their opinions, to think for themselves, to make decisions. When they fail, to share that with you and figure out a new path forward. Take the learning and keep moving over and over again. Have the grit to do that. And you as a leader, if you develop them, you can set them free. Now back to Michael. When I think about this coaching sense inside of leadership today, I do feel like it's evolving quicker than what people think because our technology is evolving, the change and adaptation. You have even things like today, one of the big conversations is how do we handle coronavirus in our organization?
Right.
We didn't even prepare for that a month ago.
Right.
And now we're looking at things differently and making big decisions because of this, sometimes losing money in that case. But the coaching way of doing this leadership is such an important part of being a leader. But I find one of the biggest excuses is, but it's just so much easier to just tell them what to do.
Right. Yeah. So I founded a company. So I'm an entrepreneur. Like I'm a leader of a fast growth company. So I'm amongst my peers as I speak about this. And we've trained north of 200,000 managers and leaders now around how to be more coach-like. And we've learned that there are 5 standard ways of resisting being more coach-like. So maybe it's helpful if I just speak those out loud so everybody on the other side of the microphone here knows that I know what you're going through.
Sure.
Here's the first thing people go when you go, somebody like Gene shows up and goes, no, coaching, you should think about it. The first thing people go is, look, I don't have time for that. Like, we are a fast growing company. You know what that means? I've got no time for anything. I am stretched from dawn to dusk. And I've had coaches, Gene might be one of them. And I see how long a coaching conversation takes. It's 30 minutes, it's an hour. Who has time for that? And the answer is nobody does. In fact, here's the key insight. If you can't coach somebody in 10 minutes or less, you do not have time to coach them. People go, okay, well, that's interesting, Michael. But here's the second resistance. I still do not have time to coach people. Honestly, even if I could coach in 10 minutes or less, I don't have the capacity to add coaching to everything else I'm already trying to do. I'm trying to be strategic. I'm trying to do blue ocean strategy. I'm trying to launch new pieces. I'm trying to understand social media I'm trying to deal with coronavirus. I don't have time to add coaching to my busy life. And I'm like, you know what? You are right. This is not about adding coaching, because if you're trying to do that, it's never going to happen. It is about transforming what you currently do to be more coach-like. So it's not adding anything. That's just pouring water into a full glass. It's transforming how you show up currently in the work you do currently to be more coach-like. Then people go, all right, Michael, third resistance. Look, I don't want to be a coach. I am an entrepreneur. I'm a leader. I'm a founder. I'm a CEO. I've met coaches. They're all kind of failed executives, or they're life coaches, and they're all a bit touchy-feely, or they're ex-sports coaches, which means they shout at me. Look, I don't want to be a coach. Don't make me be something that I'm not. And I'm like, oh, we don't want you to be a coach. You need to be you in the role you're currently at in your company. We want you to be more coach-like. It is a leadership behavior. It's not a profession. So now we're on to the fourth resistance, which is like people go, all right, Michael, but okay, you're making this all sound less weird. So I like it. It's fast. It's everyday. It's a leadership behavior. But I'm not even sure what we're talking about here. What do you mean by coaching or being more coach-like? Because it's language we've all heard, but there's 1,000 definitions for that. So let me give you my simple behavior-based definition. It's, can you stay curious a little bit longer? Can you rush to action and advice giving a little bit more slowly? So this is really specific. There's nothing weird about this. Can you just stay curious a little bit longer, rush to action and advice giving a little bit more slowly? So action and advice still in the mix, just a little bit more slowly. Now they're like, okay, this is great. Definitely less weird. I mean, if it's just being curious, I can do that. But then they go, but okay, Michael, what's in it for me? Like, I get that this will help my team be more confident and more competent and more self-sufficient and more autonomous. And I get how actually having that happening in my organization, that serves the bigger organization. But how's this going to make me feel better? Because you're asking me to change my behavior, and that's hard. I'm like, okay, so if you get to be more coach-like, here's what will actually happen. You'll work a little less hard and you'll have more impact. And if that sounds at least interesting to you, the work, a little less longer hours, but making more of a difference in the work that you do, then it's worth experimenting with this curiosity stuff to see how it plays out for you.
That reminds me of one of your core principles in here around coaching is be lazy.
Yeah, I know. There are 3 principles: be lazy, be curious, be often. And be lazy is often, it sounds the most provocative. It's actually not the most radical of those 3. But it's like, stop working so hard to try and save the day and save everybody else. That's not your job. Your job is to enable others to work hard. And it's, whenever we do this, we're teaching this stuff, people start off by going, I don't know about lazy. Look, I didn't get where I am today by being lazy. And by the end of an experience, they're like, oh, I get the lazy. I love the lazy. I could do with more lazy in my life. The more radical of those 3 principles, be lazy, be curious, be often, is actually be often. Because here's what it says, and this can really revolutionize how people think about this stuff. B often says every interaction with somebody can be more coach-like, whether it's a formal meeting or an informal get-together or a team meeting or a text or a phone call or a Slack communication. Because if you're just saying being more coach-like is just staying curious a little bit longer, you can do that in any channel, and you can do it asynchronously as you go through this. And that, if you show up going, wow, every interaction I can have with somebody could be just a little bit more curious, that's when radical change really starts to show up.
Well, I want to give you a chance to go through one more element from the book, because I really like this, and I've used this in my own speeches, but the pull of the status quo is very strong.
Very strong.
One of the strongest things I've seen is just to do what we've always done.
Right.
Why did you include that element into this book on the advice trap?
Well, I think it just is partly speaking to and just honestly recognizing the challenge at hand, because people can get excited by reading the book or excited by this podcasting, hearing me kind of rabid about, look, it's just staying curious a little bit longer. And they're like, yeah, I'm up for it. I like this adventure. It sounds cool. It sounds important. It sounds like it would make my company different and my leadership different, my team different, and it will. All of that is true. But it's like, and it takes work to do this. And in the book, in the opening of the coaching habit, the first chapter is about, let me tell you about habits, because habits are the building blocks of behavior change. And we talk about the new habit formula in that first book. In this book, we go, okay, so you need to understand habits, because that's how you set yourself and get in the reps so that you actually start rewiring your brain to change your behavior. But sometimes you need to go a little deeper before you can step into the habit piece. And in this book, I talk about the difference between easy change and hard change. So easy change we're good at. It's like, you come across something you haven't done before, you have a first go at it, you kind of figure it out, you maybe listen to a podcast, watch a YouTube video, read a book, get a teenager to explain it to you, you figure it out, you do it a few more times, you get better at it, and you master it. In some ways, the metaphor is like, it's like downloading a new app onto your phone. You're kind of adding a little piece of content to what's already there. Hard change, and we all know hard change, is when for some reason, even though you've read the books and talked to the teenager and watched the video, you still can't quite figure out how to do this. And you're like, God, I got it in my brain, but how do I actually get this done? So I change the way that I work. And the metaphor here is, this is not an app being downloaded. You need a new operating system. You need rewiring. One of them is an aggregation to current you, the present version of you. The other, hard change, is about committing to a future you. It's like, this is how you level up as a leader. This is how you level up as a human being. And status quo keeps pulling us back to stick to easy change, and then with the hard change, just too hard, so don't bother about it. And to break through the status quo, to step into that future you version, it really takes kind of tackling the hard change piece. And that's where we get into this. Well, what does it mean to actually tame your advice monster?
Well, I appreciate you being here. I want to ask one more question, and this is not from the book. This is just my own kind of observation. Founders and leaders really do love to focus on the external. I ask them about their challenges, and they'll say, well, we need to increase sales. We need to increase, get better at marketing or open up new offices, raise capital. It's all external. But the real issues are going on internal inside them. The anxiety they feel, the pressure they feel. But the same thing is going on with our employees.
That's right.
The internal issues. So how would you coach someone to find and be more curious about those internal issues going on that is stopping an employee from playing at their optimal level?
Yeah, I've got a really simple solution to that. It's a 2-word solution. So the simple solution is this. Actually, let me start with a framing of it so people see the difference. And the jargony framing is the difference between coaching for performance and coaching for development. Coaching for performance is kind of getting stuff done. Coaching for development is growing your people who are getting stuff done. A more vivid metaphor, imagine a fire. if you're a founder or a team leader, you're looking at the fire and you're going, this fire needs to be dealt with. It needs to be built up and it needs to be expanded, or it needs to be put out, or it needs to be looked after, banked in some way. That's coaching for performance, dealing with the fire. Coaching for development is dealing with the person who has to deal with the fire, helping them go, how are you going to do all that stuff that's required? And so often in our organizations, particularly fast-moving companies, we're like, who has time for the development stuff? We've got so much to get done. Focus on the doing of it. The being of it can wait until later. But here's a simple way, a simple technique that can make conversations on a day-to-day basis be both about getting stuff done and about growing your people, which is about the internal challenges we're talking about, Gene. And it's adding the phrase, 2 words, for you, onto the end of questions. So I'll give you an example. One of the most powerful questions in the Coaching Habit book, the first one, is what's the real challenge here for you? What's the real challenge here for you? If you ask people the short version of that, what's the challenge here? People are going, it's the fire, idiot. That's the thing that's the challenge, obviously. And you told me it's the challenge, and I know it's a challenge, so deal with the challenge. If I go, what's the real challenge here? That becomes a more powerful question right away, because it doesn't say, just tell me about the fire. It says, what exactly about the fire? Say, we don't have the right wood, or, it's a chemical fire, or, it's in the wrong fireplace. So it becomes more subtle right away. But if you ask, what's the real challenge here for you? The spotlight swings from the problem to the person solving the problem. And now it's like, my problem is I've never seen a chemical fire, or I don't know how to get the wood, or I'm afraid of fire. And it becomes a much richer conversation, because they're like, this is what's hard for me about dealing with this problem. And when you do this, you get that growth from a person, plus you get the problem sorted out. And just to show you that this isn't just, Michael mouthing off. One of our clients at Box of Crayons is Microsoft. And about 2 months ago, maybe a little longer now, I was at the Microsoft Salesforce sales conference down in Las Vegas. And in front of about 3,500, 4,000 people, I coached the head of sales. So, reports directly to Satya Nadella, using pretty much just that question. Because here's the thing, particularly with founders and senior people, they love to stay in the high level, the abstract, the big picture, because that's their job, is to see all of that. So I start coaching this courageous man who's volunteered to be coached in front of 4,000 of his colleagues. And I'm like, okay, so what's the real challenge here for you? And he goes, blah, 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 visionary, big picture stuff. And I go, that's great, but what's the real challenge here for you? And he's like, blah, 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 big picture, visionary stuff. I'm like, this is excellent, and I'm excited for you because I can see how excited you are, but what's the real challenge here for you? And he's like, blah, blah, blah. And I go, no, but really, what's the real challenge here for you? And he's like, I have to change the way I lead, because I grew up under Steve Ballmer, which is a certain style of leadership, and now under Satya Nadella with a commitment to a growth mindset and moving from a know-it-all organization to a learn-it-all organization. I've actually got to rebuild myself as a leader. And it was an electric moment, because the whole room saw this man being vulnerable in a way that they really hadn't seen before. But B, it was completely different from everything he'd just been talking about, because everything before was like strategy and big picture and driving sales and clients and all of that external stuff that we were talking about. And just that willingness I had to go, look, what's the real challenge here for you? For you. I get it, for you. And that was what in 5 minutes changed the conversation radically and changed him. Like, he is a different man now for having had that conversation with me.
And I'm going to point out the power of questions. It wasn't advice you gave him. It wasn't about
what am I going to tell the head of sales of Microsoft? I mean, what could I possibly give him that would be useful advice? I got nothing.
I'm sure you have some things, but just the power of those questions, it allowed him to see for himself that he's got to make a change under this new leadership. And that's the power that we're talking about. Being
Exactly.
curious. So, Michael, thank you for being here on the show. Grow Think Tank appreciates you for sharing your wisdom.
Gene, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you. You made it very easy for me.
Wow. I love what I do because I get to read a book like The Advanced Trap, and I get to ask questions of the authors. I get to bring this to you of value because I know you as a leader know that you want to effect change. You want to evolve as a leader. You want to be a more effective leader. And these interviews are exactly the tools I use to do that on the front end. If you want deeper work, if you want one-on-one conversations, I'm a coach. I specialize in working with founders, leaders, and their teams that are growing fast. And if that's you, you have questions about your defining moments of growth, make sure you reach out to me, Gene@GeneHammett.com. Now, take this episode and share it with a friend. But as always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.